Okay, I thought I would talk a little bit about AI in our classroom since it's a very popular topic. I spent quite a bit of my time this summer, including I'm still taking a class on AI, and I want to talk a little bit about what it is because I'd have to admit I'm not an expert on AI, but I realize that lots of people are using it, including myself. I want to talk about where it can be used in our class specifically, and especially where it can't be used. There are a few things that we won't be using it for, and I want to explain why we should be using it for that. Okay, so first, what is AI, generative AI? If you've read the syllabus, you know that I put probably a fairly long paragraph on what AI is according to my own version. So, of course, everyone knows that it's artificial. It isn't real, or what I should say, it isn't alive. Um, it isn't intelligent like people. So, for one thing, it isn't alive. And when it creates what it creates, especially in terms of words, all it is doing is guessing at what the next word is based on what it was fed. Um, and if you've been keeping up on the news, you'll see that AI companies are kind of destroying a whole bunch of old books because they're feeding this information into their program to get it to respond more like people. So this is probably really important to remember that it's not intelligent, it's not alive, and it really is just guessing what the next word should be. I mean, it can instantly produce an essay, a 10-page essay in 5 seconds, but it doesn't know what it's writing. It doesn't understand what it's writing. It's guessing what it thinks you might want to read. And of course, there are lots of issues like this. And of course, your brain doesn't work like that. Um, I just mentioned it spits out what it was put in. Now, the reason I want to talk about this is because we know that generative AI programs are only trained on certain information. And most of that is based on the West. So I've got a couple of articles I'd like you to read on where AI is being fed from. And so it only knows part of human knowledge. So when you ask it something, or when you ask it to, I don't know, hopefully you're not doing this, write an essay, it it doesn't know everything. It's not like a human where you have information or access to information from other parts of the world. It really is really based on Western knowledge, and we all know the issues that are that come along with that. I mentioned it only predicts what it's doing. So each word, it predicts what's coming for the next. And that's based again on what it was fed. And again, keep thinking about this fact that it's only based on certain amounts of human knowledge. So one article I have you read is about how it's missing a whole bunch of information and knowledge from India. It's actually a really interesting article. And it's also reliant on prompting. So you have to tell it what you want it to do. And if your prompt is weak or unclear, it's going to give you quite a mess and it won't make any sense. So what can it be used for? So we know it's really useful for digesting huge amounts of information. And I'll fully admit that I use it. I'm the president of the Berkeley Architectural Heritage Association, and I sometimes give it Excel sheets with a huge amount of information, and I ask it to give me a summary. I have used it for oral histories where I feed it an oral history into Word. A Word creates a transcript, and I give the transcript to AI, and I ask it to create a summary and a map of where people are talking about, and so on. But I can't trust it totally because it gets things wrong. And again, it doesn't understand what it produces. That's what the human brain is for. It can generate new text, sure, but again, it's just predicting. It's not understanding what it's doing. And one thing I also use it for is to generate images. I haven't done videos yet, but I'm trying that out. The problem with a lot of these AI programs is that they're subscription based, so you have to pay quite a bit of money to get it to do things. But it is great to generate images. Okay, so where can it be used in our class? I know it's a new thing, and as I put here, I'm totally open to experimenting with it. But experimenting means you you and I'll talk about this in just a second. You can't have it write your essay. You can't have it write anything in this class. So we will be using an AI called Gemini. It used to be called Notebook LM, but we will be using Gemini LM for some of our assignments, especially in some discussion posts where we'll be looking at primary texts, which are texts written in the ancient world. So we'll be using, and I will set this up for us, Gemini to generate practice quizzes if you want to use them, flashcards. I don't know if people still use flashcards, but I find them still very useful for when I'm learning new information. And you can use ChatGPT, or I use Copilot. I think it's a little bit better to generate images for your video assignments. I'm totally happy if you do that, as long as you give proper citation. So whenever you create a source, an image by AI, you really need to source it and say, this is generated by AI. So again, we will be using Gemini, and I will be talking about that in another video. Okay, so where can't it be used? So I just went through and told you AI is essentially biased because it's only getting a certain amount of human knowledge, mostly from the West, and it doesn't know what it's writing. It's just predicting what it should write from word to word to word. So you can't use this to write your essays. It doesn't know what it's doing, and you, as a human, have a brain for a reason. You use it to create new things and to make discoveries and so on. So you can't use that to write an essay. You can't use it also to when you take your quizzes. So you need to make sure you can understand this information. And you have to trust yourself. You have to do the work. I will tell you, lots of people are using AI in their employment right now. I would be very hesitant to do something like that unless you understand what you're asking it to do. So if if you ask it to write an essay on the Roman Republic and Herculaneum, if you don't know anything about that topic, you don't know what is being generated by AI. So you have to know your information, you have to know the knowledge. And when you get into a job in the future, if you're just sitting there putting your work into AI, you're going to be in big trouble. So you want to make sure you write your own essays, you think about what you're writing about, and take your quizzes based on the information you know. And I will talk about this. We will be using Turnitin for checking your essays for AI. And I really don't like doing that. And I would prefer just to trust that people aren't using it for writing. But I know people get nervous and think they can't do something in the course. But just remember, it's far better to fail an assignment than to use AI for academic dishonesty. Like, always come to me if you have any questions about the class or can't figure something out, or you're having difficult just writing, come and talk to me first. Okay, so when can you use AI? So as I mentioned, you can use it as long as you cite it for like images, voiceovers. I'm happy if you use that for the videos you'll be creating. You also need to, as I put here, acknowledge to yourself that you did not create what it spits out. So I put a little note at the beginning of this PowerPoint that PowerPoint has this really nice feature where it'll generate images for you, or it'll find images for you. So I put a note like I used PowerPoint to pull all of these images down. And so I've already acknowledged that all these images are created by PowerPoint, which I'm assuming is probably connected to Copilot, their AI. Remember, it doesn't understand what it's doing. It doesn't understand the output. Even if it's correct, it doesn't understand it. You have to remember that that is the case. And your brain is way more powerful than an AI. I know it seems like it's not with all the news and going on, but it should be used as it was designed to be used, which is thinking, critical thinking, solving problems, and so on. And I just put a little analogy here. It's like a shovel. Shovel's great, but useless unless you know where to use it and where it's appropriate. And someone has to pick it up. A person has to pick it up. Okay, so dangers of using AI. So I've had you read a couple articles in the class about this. It is biased. We are a really diverse student body, diverse faculty, and AI is fed mostly from the West. So you want to ask yourself, do you want to use information that's biased? If for some reason use it to write an essay in this class, which you should not, or another class, it depends on the professor, but more than likely you're going to be asked not to use AI. Do you want to use biased information? Because that is exactly what you're going to get. Doesn't know what it's doing, but you have a brain and you do know what you're doing. Which are you going to trust more? Are you going to trust an AI that's biased and doesn't know everything and doesn't understand everything, or your brain, which you will be using in this class to problem solve and so on? It's new technology, I fully admit that. I don't fully understand how AI works. I just have a basic understanding of what it does. And it does change daily, as we know, if you keep track of all this in the news. And you need to use it at your own risk. And now the AIs will tell you they do make mistakes. And of course, they do because they don't know what they're doing. Um, it hasn't been trained on all human knowledge. I keep saying that, but I want to make sure this point comes across. It doesn't think at all, but you do. It's not alive, it's not intelligent. Now, I've been reading a lot about what's called cognitive offload, where you're essentially loaning your brain out or not using your brain and giving it to a biased AI to do something. What this eventually will do is you'll rely on it more and more, using your brain less and less. And you are going to be in trouble if you start thinking about it like that, in terms of using it like that. Um, it might be part of your employment in the future. Might not, but you need to make sure you understand what you're doing and what you're using it for before you use it. And of course, um, again, I'm not an expert AI, but I do know some of the basics, and hopefully this small lecture on the use of AI in our classroom is useful in terms of what we're going to do with it, how we're going to use it, and what you shouldn't use it for.